first day, we talked a little bit about Tony DeWan's scale of awesomeness. Do you remember that thing? That was, does it work? Does it meet the functional requirements? Does it work well? And I think we've starting to get to that point with Note Herder, right? And we got to that point for sure with Jeffervescence. Can it be made better? In other words, is it even possible to refactor this stuff? If you haven't heard the word refactoring before, refactoring is the process of restructuring existing code without changing its behavior. So don't change the way it works at all, just change how the code is written. That's refactoring, which kind of by definition, it's impossible to do without tests, and we didn't talk about software testing. So refactoring improves non-functional attributes of the software, stuff that doesn't actually change the behavior. And we do a fair amount of that on the fly in class, right? We write it one way, make it work, and then we're like, okay, so maybe we should break this out into a separate function here. Maybe we should use this way that we didn't know about before to achieve the exact same effect. Maybe we should break this out into a component. Yeah, so that's kind of what that third point is about. Can it be made better? Could it work elsewhere? Which could mean a couple of things. One is that you make your code self-contained with as few dependencies as possible so that if you found another problem that might have the same solution, you could drop your existing code in with minimal changes. And components sort of encourage this sort of design by making these things, if you need a note list somewhere else, you might not have to change too many things about this because it's not dependent on a whole lot of other components. You just have to pass in certain props. So you can sort of reuse some of that stuff. Yeah, another way to read this is the ability to to create generalized solutions that solve more than just the specific problem at hand. So for example, after Miles started working with me at that other place, we had the need, because of a feature request from someone else, we had the need to generate PDFs from this app. It was a web app. And we figured out how to generate that from HTML. And then Miles went an extra step and created a library that does just that. It just takes HTML in, spits PDFs out. Because there's a command line utility that sort of does that. But he made a really easy way to add that to specifically a Ruby project to generate PDFs, really, really easily. So he created a third-party library, and in Ruby they're called gems, but things like NPM packages. Like whoever wrote React-RTE needed a rich text editor, right? That did something specific, like output HTML. So sure, he probably had to do that for a specific project, right? He wasn't just doing it for kicks. But he made it a component that other people could reuse too, so that other people didn't have to reinvent the wheel. So stuff like that's really nice. So Miles made that thing. It was called Wicked PDF. After a couple of years, he got sick to death of maintaining it. And Dave Jones has maintained that for quite a few years. And it has 3 million downloads. Because when he had the need to create PDFs out of HTML, he didn't just write a version that only worked in that one app. Because guess what? We've needed to do that thing since then too. So he made a generalized solution for it, and lots of other people have used it. Under the can it be made better, when I showed this list the first time, I think I rephrased it slightly, but can anyone else understand it? Can everyone else understand it? Is your code readable? It's a big deal, not just for other people, but for you. And if you're going to work on a team, for heaven's sake, write stuff that other people are going to be able to maintain. It's not that much extra work, and in the long run, it is way less work. It is way less work to write something that you're going to have to maintain if you take a little extra time when you're writing things to be thoughtful about how you break things out into methods and all of that stuff. Will it work in a year? Will it work in 5 years? It's impossible to make your code completely future-proof, but you can do some things to ensure that it keeps running. For example, having things like lock files, so that if rebase does get updated, anyone who downloads your code is going to get the right version. So, like in some package management systems, they don't force you to list a version number. So you could just say, I require rebase. And if that's all you put in your list of dependencies, then other people who download your code, it may break on them because they happen to get the latest version, which is different than the one you developed against. But the point of the scale is to keep growing. You can always be better, and just because your code works doesn't mean you're finished, and there's no more room for improvement. So let's talk a little more about what it is to be a true professional and kind of what it is to be a senior developer. A lot of people have surprisingly vague notions of what distinguishes a senior developer. A lot of companies and a lot of people who've been doing it a long time have really vague notions like, I know it when I see it. Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't, because it means something pretty specific to us. So why should you care? Well, it goes without saying, I hope, that you're not there yet, right? And it's good to know what you're aiming for. It helps you set goals. It helps you decide what you're going to study next, that kind of thing. This is one thing I found once. A couple of questions that it's helpful for a hiring manager to think about when evaluating a potential hire. First, how much direction will this person need? And perhaps slightly less obvious, how much direction will they be able to provide to others? So when hiring a senior developer, you may ask these two questions. It is not just, can you do stuff without someone telling you exactly what to do, but also, can you help other developers? Because it's really important. And some people are tempted to only consider the first question. The folks at Frontside, I don't know much about them, but they came up with a really great framework for how they determine seniority. And I think this thing is great. The intersection of how well a person works independently and leads, that's kind of what I just talked about. How technically capable they are, which is the most obvious part of senior developer, right? And how well they connect and contribute to a larger community. So those three things again. First, how well a person works independently and leads. In other words, leadership. How technically capable they are, technical capability, and how well they connect and contribute to a larger community or connectedness. So a Venn diagram here. At the center of the Venn diagram is the mythical senior developer. But each of these three tracks has a junior to senior path all its own. So if it's beginning to sound like a lot of work to reach this point, yeah, it is. So let's take a closer look at each of the three tracks, because there's a lot more to it than just learning more languages or even getting good at learning more languages. Because there's more to being a good team member and even a good person than just that. So technical capability. I'm talking too fast. We'll start there. A person with high technical capability is technically curious, tackles problems without giving up, and produces solutions less experienced folks can use, maintain, and learn from. Technically curious. Hopefully all of you are. You all showed up to the boot camp. Tackles problems without giving up. When you ran into something in your homework, did you keep plugging away? Did you keep trying? And produces solutions that less experienced folks can use, maintain, and learn from. Now, you're not the super experienced folks yet. But if you know that that's what you want to be. You want to be a developer who writes stuff that other people can understand. Then you start to develop good habits earlier. Notice that knows every API under the sun without looking at documentation isn't on the list. Being able to whiteboard reversing a linked list isn't up there. So any questions about what we mean by technical capability? Okay, leadership. A person with leadership skills knows how to develop and follow a sense of purpose in themselves and others. They're willing to point out, own, and fix things that are broken about their organization and in their own career tracks. Taking responsibility. Connectedness or community. A person with community skills has a sense of being part of a larger whole, a desire to contribute, and a sense that the other people, coworkers, users, clients, are not simply characters in his or her own movie, but fully realized individuals. This can be tough. And that's one that often gets neglected by those folks we were talking about who maybe they're super proficient at developing solutions, but they can't get along with anyone else. I would not call that person a senior developer, and I would not hire that person. You have to be able to look outside yourself, recognize that other people are people too, like real people, not just props. And being not just being willing to contribute, but having a desire to contribute, wanting to do things like teach a boot camp to a bunch of college students. College students, gross, right? No. So I'll be frank, very few people reach the senior level in all three categories. Very few people even want to reach the senior level in all three. But at Fretless, we follow the same model. Came up with this model, which is that if someone has reached the senior level in technical capability and one of the other two traits, and is at least mid-level in the other one, we consider them a senior developer. So if you take nothing else from this talk, let it be this. Technical capability is not enough to qualify a senior in our world. No one with mad technical skills wants to hear that, but we can't deliver the kind of products we need to based on technical skills alone. So we work with employees to identify the areas in which they're interested in improving, and we try to provide an environment in which we hope they're able to do that. Give them the space and the resources that they need. So if I may use our illustrious friend Seth as an example, when he started at Fretless, he'd already developed a pretty strong sense of leadership. His time at Apple was excellent preparation for this, regardless of what he chose to pursue next. Wherever he went, whether it was as a programmer or anything else, that prepared him pretty well. And he also had a pretty strong sense of community. Like I said, very shortly after he started at Fretless, and he's only worked here a year, he pushed us to start a weekly technical book club. He could have just kept reading tech books on his own, but he pushed us all to do the same, and it's been great. So that's 2 out of the 3, but recall that one of the 2 must be technical capability in order for you to be considered senior. And we break down technical capability even into 3 things. And when he was straight out of the boot camp he went to, I'd say he was off the charts for curiosity and very quickly learned that he was extremely driven to work out a problem until he found a solution. He never gave up. And frankly, his solutions at that point were already pretty good, but he simply hadn't built very many things or been exposed to all that many solutions yet. So naturally, he wasn't quite there in the last part yet, but he was as close as a person can be out of a boot camp. I like to say that, whenever he stands up here, there should be a little disclaimer at the bottom, results not typical. It's not normal to be doing what he's doing 2 years after you first learn how to program. So I'd like him to kind of share his story, how he got here. Before he does that, I'll go ahead and tell you this. I will turn the recording off, and we'll turn it back on for Seth's story.